Hello, everyone, and welcome to yet another episode of the Velero Community Meeting and Open Discussion. Today is June 30th, 2020. We're going on week umpteenth of the COVID stay at home regulations. So we're all staying at home. So let's get together and talk about something fun. Let's talk about Velero. So I'm going to share my screen. If you want to add your stuff into the HackMD, if you have any discussion topics or anything else you want to talk about, please add them there. I'll share my screen and let's get started. All right, so get a few status updates here. I'm going to let Carlisia go first today.
Hello. So I have this PR ready for review that adds a controller for the backup storage location. And this does change the way Velero behaves. So currently, right when Velero is installed, we validate that there is that all backup storage locations that exist are valid. And if even one is invalid, we halt the system. So we had a request to change that. And so this changes that. So Velero will never halt. It will validate any backup storage location. And if it's all good, it will mark as available. And if it's not, it will mark as unavailable and throw an error, but it will continue. And if everything is unavailable, if you have no backup storage location or they are all invalid, then pretty much you can't create a backup and you can't sync any backup, so you can't do anything. But the Velero server will still be up and running, so it won't be crashing and making you wonder, why did it crash? Because of this, because of that. So you just have the error message there and you know exactly why you can't do anything. So I think it's a pretty cool improvement. And so appreciate reviews. I have to add a webhook validation to the create an update for the backup storage locations. And then I'm gonna, yeah, that's it. And then I'm gonna be working on converting another controller to the kubebuilder runtime controller stuff. That's it. And I need to do PR reviews.
Sounds good. Any questions, comments for Carlisia and the PR here? All right, moving on to Ashish.
I was on community support last week, so a lot of GitHub issue triage and stuff. Apart from that, I worked on some internal build setup and like verifying the artifacts generated by the build were actually usable. So I was doing that. This other issue came up last week. Issue 2673, which is an ask to auto-include CRDs when backing up custom resources, even if during backup and restore, actually, even if like the include cluster resources flag is not provided. So I opened this up and I had a discussion with Andy about this on Slack and opened this issue up. And then currently I'm working on some load testing for restic. Other than that, to back up, working on load testing for restic. If any of you have done any sort of load testing on using restic, we would love to hear from you and hear what your experiences were and what is the load that you ran and what was the outcome. So if you have anything to contribute to that, please let us know. We would love to hear from you.
So Ashish,
that's it. Yep.
On the CRD thing, are we currently then restoring the CRDs and the CRs as part of the restore?
So no, the order is not the problem. It is, you need to say, I want to include cluster resources, because CRDs are cluster resources.
Mm-hmm.
So you need to say, I want, when I perform this restore, I want to include cluster resources during restore. So even if your backup has CRDs in it, if you don't run the restore with include cluster resources, the CRDs may not be applied.
Ashish,
Right.
did you confirm this yourself? Because like I swear Steve fixed this for 1.4. Like I was positive this was a bug that was fixed in 1.4.
I did not see the code that in the place where I thought I should, but we can double check. I did not run tests to confirm this. It was just code inspection and discussion over Slack.
Yeah, no, the VMware supervisor cluster, they want to restrict the creation of CRDs, and that's probably going to be a headache.
Okay.
So
Maybe.
we'll have to come back to that when we start looking at supervisor cluster some more. We may have to slip supervisor cluster.
Okay.
Or restrict this create cluster. Maybe we restrict the use of this create cluster resources flag. What else would be in the cluster resources?
Persistent volumes, cluster role, but I can't remember cluster roles or cluster role bindings. Which one is in the cluster resources? Namespaces are a cluster resource.
Yeah.
Right.
The CRDs themselves are the cluster resource. Some CRDs can have their custom resources defined as a cluster resource, as a cluster level resource. So,
right. We've done some of those.
Yeah. So, lots of things.
Yeah, I know. So I think we're going to have a sit down and see how these things intersect. So currently it would quote unquote work because we're going to run Velero with the cluster admin role, which you normally don't get. So we can, for example, slam CRDs in, but it's probably not the mechanism they want, at least not at this point, because it would really let you backdoor things in by creating a backup with CRDs in them and then restoring the backup. And normally you're restricted from creating CRDs. So that's going to be painful. And
The tricky part is if you're not able to create it, I'm not sure how it ended up in your backups.
No, so the user is. We can. Do we want to go into the whole supervisor cluster?
No, probably not.
Well,
in this meeting.
if you could do a get operation, then you should be able to put it in the backup. But the create would be the failure on restore time.
So there's a special path for creating CRDs, and typically the user doesn't get cluster admin. There's another path to the app operator that allows you to get the cluster admin role and create CRDs. Also, namespaces need a little special vSphere stuff in supervisor clusters, so they actually get their resources allocated. Otherwise, they don't work. So we were planning to not do automatic namespace restore for supervisor cluster yet. Yeah, I think we'll have to work this one through. Yeah.
Yeah, before starting working on that, maybe or whoever starts to work on that, we should verify that what is in the issue is actually true by running some tests. I'm going to add that to the issue comment.
Any other questions, comments for Ashish? All right, Nolan.
So just to let everyone know, I was out the end of last week for some family health issues, so that was kind of abrupt. So I know there were some reviews and some design documents that we wanted to get in last week, and that did not happen, so I apologize there. So I was doing a lot of reviews and updating on docs. For example, I was trying to get Jason Scarano up to speed on implementing some new commands. Also doing some investigation on the restic stuff that Ashish was talking about, and some internal build stuff for our vSphere plugin. Let's see. I was doing some thinking on prep work for concurrency or worker pods that I'll have in the discussion topics. I don't think I have a whole lot else. I'll be on community support this week, so I might have a little bit of a backlog from yesterday. I think that's mostly what I've got. Yeah.
That sounds good. Any questions, comments for Nolan? Anything you need with regards to the updates on docs or any reviews?
Honestly, I need to go back through. I need to go through my email and all my GitHub stuff still. So I don't know. So yeah, right now I know it's in the contributor shoutouts, but I know I owe Vishnu a reply on some things. But from my perspective, like for the volume snapshotter progress, I left out a word there. Volume snapshotter progress design. I'm ready to put my approval on that, and we can move that forward. And I know, we intended to get the restore hooks design meeting going this week. So I'd like to get that scheduled when that's a good time for everyone. Those are the two things that came to mind off the top of my head.
Hey, Nolan, for the Restore Hooks design meeting, it looks like Monday morning is going to be the best time. So I'll be sending that out and coordinating with Jonas for getting that out on Twitter and the community meeting, and then we can just go from there.
Awesome.
Great.
Perfect. All right. I think we are ready to move into the discussion topics. So
we should maybe add that to the meeting notes that we have scheduled. So if somebody is looking at the notes as an afterthought, can.
I'll do that.
Also, okay. Thanks.
So Nolan, you want to take it away with the discussion topic?
Yeah. So I was thinking about how we can make moving to worker pods, or even moving to making Velero a little bit more distributed, whether that's more distributed controllers or worker pods or something else, make that a little bit easier. And also possibly making our libraries easier and making the move to kubebuilder and controller runtime easier. And I was thinking about, there's an issue out there which I need to go find. Thinking about moving the code that sits in the backup and restore controllers into the backup and restore packages. So package backup and package restore. There is an old PR from Steve that lists, I think it was the backup controller into package backup. And he also had a demo PR, or maybe it was a demo branch that I think he might have showed on a community meeting a while ago, that showed a command that ran inside worker pods. And so I wanted to float the idea of starting to maybe not doing huge moves, but starting to move little bits of code from backup and restore controllers into package backup and package restore as we're designing the worker pods and the controller or the concurrency, so that when we get to actually doing that work, it's a smaller lift. And we're doing the code cleanup now, since our 1.5 release is going to be mostly focused on restore hooks. I'm willing to take on that work because I think it's mostly going to be shuffling things around. I'm curious what other people's thoughts are on that.
Nolan, do you think that logic needs to, Velero users or obviously I'm talking about developers, would need to have access to that logic?
Maybe. I did wonder about making whatever that is, just making package backup and package restore public. And I would have to think about what that API actually is, but I'm not sure I see the downside. But I don't know. Since I don't know exactly what the API will be.
So if you look at the PR that I listed there on today's agenda,
Mm-hmm.
I put the logic for the backup controller for the backup
BSL.
storage location.
Uh-huh.
I put any logic that did not belong in the controller. I put it behind internal in a package called Velero.
Okay.
And I don't see that anybody would need to use that logic. Now, going forward with removing, I was going to make removing the logic part of the kubebuilder conversion. So we definitely should, I mean, whether we do it in parallel or make it part of that conversion, or whoever does the conversion too, we'll figure it out. But we definitely should settle on in a place, and maybe it might be two places. My personal opinion is we should put all the logic behind the internal directory. And if people need to use, they should tell us and tell us why, so we can properly design things, design the public API, because then we're going to have to support that API going forward. So until we know what people are using this stuff for, I'd say let's make it all private. And yeah, just expose what we have to, what we know people are using. And when we know how they're using, we'll be able to properly design the interface.
Yeah, that's fair.
But
Yeah,
wouldn't that be, wouldn't the move alone be like a breaking change for people? If somebody's already using things.
If it's sitting inside the controller, maybe. A lot of the stuff I'm thinking of, I'm literally going to lift it out of the controller methods, which most of those I think are private. They're not exported. And I think a lot of it is to get them out of the controllers, because we're going to need, in a worker pod design, you're not going to run the controller on every worker pod. You would be running the controller. That would, there would be a controller grabbing the backup and then basically assigning it somewhere. And then that worker would be doing the backup logic. Yeah. So we would have to extract the backup logic anyway, which would be some sort of breaking change. And that's kind of where I want to go with that, so that it's kind of ready and we don't have to do that later. Plus, if we pull that out now, it makes moving the backup and restore controllers to controller runtime easier. I won't say easy, but it makes it makes that work a smaller lift.
And yeah, it might break something, but it goes back to the issue we've been talking about, which is it is not, none of that is part of the packages that we intentionally export, and we need to start surfacing that and letting people know. But
and I can start with the stuff that is literally in the. I don't view this as one big PR. I view this as like small steps. So I can start with stuff inside of controllers' private methods, I think.
So in terms of parallelizing things out into multiple pods, what's the current bottleneck? I mean, because we should just be walking across the namespaces in the API server. So is that really a CPU intensive thing?
Honestly, the current bottleneck is we have no leader election or anything to prevent race conditions in grabbing a new backup. So when a new
no, that's why that's why you might have trouble implementing it. But in terms of like running things inside a single pod, like we're currently doing, what's the push to get this pushed out? I mean, I know I went to like a scale out data mover because the IO stuff got crazy, but are we really seeing that much in terms of doing the control path?
I think the big motivator there would be restic, which is not managed on these pods anyway.
Yeah, because restic's already scale out.
Yeah. So the other thing I want to do is revisit. So the other thing I want to do is revisit the worker pod or the concurrency and scale out design doc, and not just focus on worker pods, but focus on what do we want to do and what are the approaches. Because I think you're asking a good question, Dave. Yeah. What is the problem?
Yeah, because if our problem is throughput on traversing the API server, I mean ultimately we're banging on the API server is typically a single node, isn't it? It's not really distributed out.
That I'm not sure on.
I think it's running as a single node with failover, right? Yeah. So, if we distribute out and bang on it even more.
Yeah, that just comes down to tuning the API requests and stuff.
Well, yeah, but it also may be that we have to push some of this down the stack. We have to say, hey, in order for backup to run efficiently, we need for API server to become more threaded, more parallel.
Right. The API server is parallel. Like if you have multiple instances of your control plane machines, you can hit any of the API server to get what you want.
Okay, but we can check and see how much the actual load is, and those all go back against etcd.
I didn't hear the last bit. Those all go.
They're going back against the etcd node. So it'd be interesting to see what our bottlenecks are here, and really characterize the bottlenecks, right? I mean, because if the control path needs to go faster, that's a completely reasonable thing to do. And it's like, but is parallelizing it onto multiple worker nodes, is that going to make it go faster? Or are we going to hit another bottleneck as soon as we do that?
So I'm not sure how is the discovery shared across backups, or is it per backup? The discovery cache that we have.
I think discovery cache is shared right now.
Yeah, so that would be one.
That's one part we'll have to pull out.
Yeah.
Well, currently we're only running one backup at a time, right?
Yeah. Right. I think right now the current limitation in Velero is one backup and one restore at a time. And then the thing we want to, the goal is remove that restriction and get to do lots more. I don't know the number, but basically max out the API server. Ideally, I mean, you can't run any other work. Yeah, you can't run any other work, but
backup seems straightforward. Multiple restores at the same time,
that'll be
that
tougher.
sounds tricky.
Yeah, especially I was thinking about that, and like especially if you hit the same namespace.
Yep.
But I was thinking about that, and the way Velero currently works, if you restore, this is turning into like an ad hoc design session on the concurrency, but if you restore, let's take a namespace, but I think this can stand in for a lot of different resources. Assuming Valero's current behavior where it doesn't overwrite anything, the first restore job that restores something, we'll put it in, it'll get, assuming it's successful. The second one that comes along, we'll see it already exists and will fail.
That's okay if they're running serially, right? But PVs, for example, are being restored one by one, and if the two are running, one might restore different versions, and it's definitely something to think of.
The other aspect is to support like concurrent executions. We might not just Velero has to support it, but like also the case of hooks, right? If there are multiple backups running, you will have to be running multiple hooks, or you will have to have the ability to run multiple hooks, and those hooks internally should coordinate amongst themselves to make sure only one of them is running.
Yeah, those are going to wind. I think there's a whole design session that needs to go on.
Yeah. Like, and this was like, there's a design document that Steve had kind of closed out because it's kind of old, and it was specifically designing around worker pods. I kind of want to go higher level and say, what are all these kinds of problems, and then say what is the design that could accommodate them versus this is a design. We've been talking about like the concurrency model as worker pods, but I'm not sure if worker pods are the right design. They are a design choice, but I'm not 100% convinced yet.
I mean, you got to show that you're maxing out CPU and IO before multiple pods really makes any sense.
Right. Like I could see that we just, if we can get the Velero, like if we could use like something like a leader election that grabs the backup and assigns it, then we could just say, hey, set replicas on your deployment and be done with it. Yeah. If we could make that work, that'd be awesome. But then we still have all these other issues of restoring at the same time, concurrency on your hooks. All of those things I think are still applicable no matter what design we choose. So
yeah, the worker pods not only make sense for CPU intensive, but even for IO, right? If you have multiple pods, you are hopefully scheduling them on different nodes and thereby not maxing out like the disk queue lengths on just one node and causing IO waits.
Well, so we did that for the vSphere plugin, right? We have the scale out data manager. And so that's running as a node set, so one per node. And then they try to grab, because they're actually moving data. And most of the other implementations don't actually move any data. So even on a large API server, your actual backup winds up being what, 100 meg maybe, not even?
Yeah.
Right, because it's mostly the manifests end up being the normal max limit from etcd is 1.5 meg per object. You can tweak that if you control etcd, but if you're on a managed system, you can't. So GKE, EKS, those kinds of things. I don't know if the VMware TKG solution allows you to mess with that. But we do that and then we compress it. So 1.5 meg times, I don't know, a couple hundred, and then compress it.
Yeah, I don't think there's that many large objects at the moment. I mean, in general,
Yeah.
I would expect backups to be in the, certainly less than a gigabyte.
Right.
I mean, you're not
Yeah,
anywhere
for sure.
near maxing out IO because you're going to spend most of your time retrieving from the API server, not writing the tar file.
Right, it's HTTP calls most of the time. So I'm curious, seeing who else is on. I'm curious if anybody else has thoughts on this. I think to pop up real quickly to the other topic, I think Carlisia's point makes sense that we move it to an internal package for now, until we like design package backup and package restore, because I have heard requests for, hey, wouldn't it be awesome if we could just run a Velero as an API? But I think that warrants design time.
Yeah.
And people can run it as an API if you just submit CRDs or CRs.
Right. That's actually the current approach we're taking with, say, for example, Veritas.
Yep.
Is for Veritas to wrap or Velero, but then we want to have an infrastructure layer. And, some of that was supposed to be the Astrolabe layer.
Mm-hmm.
And looking at how we bring that up into Velero and bring some parts of Velero down into that, I think, or where we want to look to in terms of like straight up snapshotting.
So I'm not hearing objections here. Does anyone else have any comments, concerns?
Doesn't look like it.
Nope. Okay. Otherwise, I think we can move on. I was mostly wanting to bring up this topic because I think this code move kind of hits two things we've been thinking about, which is this concurrency thing and the overall code cleanup that we've been thinking about. So.
Awesome. Does anyone else have any discussion topics for today that you would like to bring up on the community meeting?
So Nolan, backing up to the code move stuff, how does that affect something like the volume snapshotter progress? Because we want the plugins to be able to access some of these APIs. And how do we restrict access between what the plugins can do and what somebody else's code can do? Because plugins are in fact like third-party code, right?
Right. I will have to get more detailed on what I'm actually moving.
Yeah.
I think my thoughts were like, I need to find the exact issue, and maybe Steve's example PR that he had a PR open that was like moving stuff. And I think this was maybe towards 1.3, 1.4 time frame, and then he just closed it because it got stale. I don't think I would do anything as big as what Steve did. I think what I would aim for is like, let's say in package restore, there's like huge methods that I would like maybe condense or at least take them and name them. But that is a really good point. Most of the volume snapshotter progress should be external to Velero. That is like we need to include the CRDs. We need to create them in some instances, I think. I need to reread the review, reread the proposal.
The plugin actually creates the
But does it-
CRDs. Velero has to include them
Does it
in the
create
backup.
Does it create the CRDs or the CRs?
The CR, sorry.
Yeah, I do that all the time too. Yeah.
Thank you for
So
checking.
yeah, so Velero puts the definition on the API server.
Yeah.
And then the plugin would be responsible for managing the actual instances. Velero would be responsible for doing any of the backwards compatibility, checking and marshaling between the tarball. So yes, that code may be caught up in that. The marshalling code may be caught up in this.
Yeah.
But
I guess this is the things to consider when we move things. So
yeah, and we can navigate that.
yeah.
That, and I think that marshalling code is in package persistence, but I'm not 100% sure.
You may be right.
But we can also talk. I don't think Vishnu's on the call, but we can talk to him about that.
Yeah. So that.
And something I was going to mention on his when I drop another comment on there was, I would advise that when we get to implementing, we should use kubebuilder for creating those new CRDs and including them.
Yeah.
Now that we're getting on board with that and we're including a new CRD, we should be using that, even though it's an existing data type that's getting promoted. We should still be using kubebuilder. But yeah, you're right that I think as part of the backup and restore, some code will touch here, but exactly what, I don't know.
Yeah.
Anything else with regards to this topic? All right, and I don't think we have any other discussion topics for today. So Nolan, do you want to dive into the contributor shoutouts?
Yeah, I did a check, and it doesn't look like we've got any external contributor PRs merged this week, but I just wanted to say a huge thanks to Vishnu Itta for the volume snapshotter progress design doc. I know you've been patiently waiting for this, and thank you for the back and forth. So maintainers, let's get that merged this week.
Yep.
Let's read through that and make sure we get anything addressed. Also, Mark Campbell, thank you for your patience on the restore hooks design. I know we're gonna schedule a meeting for that on next Monday. This one's a big one and it's complex, but thank you, Mark, for your patience and the willingness to drive that. And also, there was one more design that I wanted to.
The ordering, I think Fuang is.
Yeah, Fuang. Yes, I have not had a chance to look at that, but thank you for submitting that, Fuang. I will get to that this week. Thank you.
Thank you. I do have a code for it ready to review too, but I need to have the design approval first. Yeah. I can demo that if we like next meeting, but it's very short. I mean, it's the total code chain is about 100 lines of code. It's pretty isolated into one area, so the regression potential is very low.
Awesome. Let's get you put in for a demo. That'll be awesome.
All right. I think that's it for today. Right. So with that, thank you all for joining today's call, and have a fantastic rest of the week. See you all next week, and yeah, bye.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye bye.